You are 12 years old. Right now, at this exact age, you are worrying about a math test, or a crush you're too embarrassed to mention, or whether your parents will let you stay up late. You are, by every modern definition, a child. Now travel back 10,000 years. Same age, same body, same brain still wiring itself together in ways scientists don't fully understand even today. Except in that world, at 12, you might already be married. You might already be pregnant. You might already be raising a child of your own while still being one yourself, and nobody around you would have blinked. This is the story of why ancient humans had children so young. And it is not the story you think it is. It is not simply that they were ignorant, or that life was nasty, brutish, and short, and everyone just crammed everything in before they died. The real answer is stranger, darker, and in some ways, more impressive than that. It involves biology bending under pressure, brutal mortality math, cultural systems built to survive extinction-level odds, and a truth about the human body that most of us have never been told. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The age at which ancient humans had children wasn't really a choice in the way we think of choices today. It was the output of a survival equation running in the background of an entire species. One where waiting was often not an option anyone could afford. But before we can understand why, we first have to destroy one of the biggest myths about ancient history. And once you hear the real explanation, you'll never look at those life expectancy numbers the same way again. You've probably heard that life expectancy in ancient times was around 30 years old, which sounds shocking, and it seems to explain everything. If people only lived to around 30, of course they'd rush into having children, right? Not exactly, because that famous number is one of the most misunderstood statistics in all of history. Life expectancy at birth in many ancient societies really was incredibly low, often somewhere in the 20s or 30s, but there was a reason for that. Imagine an ancient village. A mother gives birth. The family celebrates, but quietly, because everyone knows something terrifying. The baby still has to survive. Disease, malnutrition, infections, accidents, one by one. These invisible dangers claimed countless children before they ever reached adulthood. In many ancient populations, between 1/3 and even 1/2 of all children died before the age of 5. That horrifying reality dragged the average life expectancy dramatically downward. But here's where everything changes. If you survived childhood, if you reached your teenage years, your chances improved enormously. You weren't standing at death's door at 15. Far from it. Many ancient people lived into their 50s, their 60s. Some even reached their 70s. Grandparents weren't mythical figures. They existed. They worked. They taught. They carried knowledge that no one else possessed. And as you'll soon discover, they may have played one of the biggest roles in human survival. So the old explanation, people had children young because everyone died at 30, doesn't really hold up. The truth is much more fascinating, because the real story begins inside the human body itself, specifically with puberty. Today, in wealthy countries, most girls experience their first menstrual period somewhere around the ages of 12 and 13. That feels normal to us, almost expected. But here's something surprising. Just 150 years ago, in many parts of Europe, the average age wasn't 12. It was much closer to 15 or even 16. What changed? Not evolution, nutrition. Imagine two girls living in completely different worlds. One grows up surrounded by reliable meals, clean water, and enough calories every single day. The other lives in a world where food is never guaranteed. Some days, her family eats well. Other days, they barely eat at all. To our eyes, both girls are the same age, but inside their bodies, something very different is happening, because the human body is constantly asking a silent question. Is this environment safe enough to reproduce? Pregnancy is incredibly expensive, not financially, biologically. Growing a baby, giving birth, and producing milk requires an enormous amount of energy. If the body senses that energy is constantly running low, it often delays puberty, almost like pressing a pause button. Scientists call this idea the concept of critical fat mass. While researchers still debate the exact biological mechanisms, the overall pattern has been observed again and again throughout history. Girls living with poor nutrition or chronic food shortages often reached puberty later than girls with abundant food, sometimes at 15, sometimes 16. And during severe famine, even later. Now the picture becomes much more complicated, because if puberty itself was delayed, then the idea that every prehistoric 12-year-old was becoming a mother simply cannot be true. But don't jump to conclusions just yet, because this story is about to take another unexpected turn. While many girls reached puberty later because of poor nutrition, others lived under very different conditions, and for them, everything changed. In some ancient societies, especially among wealthier families, girls could reach puberty much earlier, and when they did, marriage often followed surprisingly quickly. One civilization in particular shows us just how different the ancient world really was: ancient Rome. And what happened there may surprise you. Ancient Rome, one of the greatest civilizations in human history. Its roads stretched for thousands of miles. Its armies conquered continents. Its laws shaped the future of Europe. And among those laws was one that sounds shocking today. Roman law allowed girls to marry at the age of 12 and boys at 14. Think about that for a moment. An age that today is associated with middle school was legally recognized as the beginning of adulthood. Now, that doesn't mean every Roman girl married at 12. Historians have found that many, especially among wealthier families, actually married later, often in their late teens. So why set the legal age so low? Because the Roman world viewed childhood very differently than we do. There was no long period called adolescence, no expectation that young people would spend years discovering themselves, finishing school, or delaying responsibility. Instead, life followed a much simpler path. First, you were a child who depended on others. Then, as soon as your body showed signs of maturity, society slowly began treating you as an adult in training. And that idea wasn't unique to Rome. Versions of it appeared across many ancient civilizations. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because biology alone wasn't pushing people toward early parenthood. The world itself was. Imagine standing in a small farming village. Nearly 8,000 years ago, there are no hospitals, no antibiotics, no vaccines, no police, no emergency services. A single infected wound could become a death sentence. A failed harvest could mean starvation. A long drought could wipe out an entire community. Even giving birth, something millions of families celebrate today, was one of the deadliest moments in a woman's life. Every sunrise brought uncertainty. Every winter tested survival. Every disease threatened to erase generations. And this constant danger changed the way human populations survived. Anthropologists describe this as high extrinsic mortality. In simple terms, it means people often died because of forces completely outside their control. Disease, violence, famine, predators, natural disasters, not because they had grown old. Now, imagine you belong to a village with only a few dozen families. Every year, someone dies, sometimes several people. If too few children survive to replace them, the entire community slowly disappears, not because of one great catastrophe, but because each generation becomes smaller than the last. This is where biology begins making difficult trade-offs. Scientists call this life history theory. Every living creature, from birds to wolves to humans, faces the same question. Should you spend more time growing stronger or reproduce earlier before something kills you? In a safe environment, waiting makes sense. You grow, you become healthier, you gather more resources, and eventually, you raise children under better conditions. But in a dangerous world, waiting was a gamble, because tomorrow might never come. The harsher the environment, the stronger the evolutionary pressure to reproduce earlier. Not because it was ideal, but because it increased the chances that a family line would survive. This wasn't a conscious choice made by every individual. It was a pattern shaped over thousands of generations. Archaeologists have uncovered the skeletons of very young mothers. Some were still teenagers. Their bones reveal something heartbreaking. The female pelvis continues developing well into the late teenage years. Yet many girls gave birth before that process was complete. The result? Obstructed labor, severe bleeding, deadly infections. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous events in human life. Nature wasn't kind. It was unforgiving. For every young mother who survived, many others didn't. Yet families kept trying, because losing too many people meant an entire community could disappear. But ancient mothers rarely faced this burden alone. Behind many surviving children was someone history overlooked: the grandmother. Scientists call this the grandmother hypothesis. After raising her own children, an older woman could help care for her grandchildren. While young parents searched for food, grandmothers protected, fed, and watched the children. This shared childcare increased the family's chances of survival. Anthropologists call it alloparenting. Children weren't raised by just two parents. They were raised by grandparents, aunts, older siblings. Not all ancient people had children at 12. The age varied depending on food, culture, environment, and social traditions. But one thing was very different from today. Childhood was much shorter. Once someone was seen as physically capable of adulthood, life expected adult responsibilities. Then humanity changed. Better nutrition, modern medicine, safer childbirth, education. Children could finally spend years learning instead of simply surviving. Today, a 12-year-old worries about school, not surviving childbirth. And that's one of the greatest achievements in human history. When we judge the past, we should remember this. Our ancestors didn't always choose the safest path. They chose the path that gave their families the best chance to survive. And because they endured that world, you're here today.